first of all, thank you for joining us. If you have a question, please use the Q&A component as in this on the screen. If you want to raise any questions, we will keep track of those particular questions. We will keep the webinar to 60 minutes, and our presenter will present the first couple of 30 minutes or 30, 40 minutes, and then afterwards we will provide an opportunity for you all to raise your questions, and we will facilitate the discussion as we move forward. Sorry, I was a little bit too fast there. So just out of interest, IPMA, the International Project Management Association, as a special interest group network. The IPMA special interest groups was initially an exploration of an area that benefit all our careers, our work, as well as the planet. The IPMA special groups are an engaging way to get involved in IPMA internationally, work with some of our peers across many different countries and time zones to solve some of the most important questions facing project success today. Our SIG members strive to advance the industry. We try to create new standards, networks with industry leaders and peers, and find those opportunities. Whilst the IPMA still have a great focus on project program as well as portfolio management. We've got multiple global SIGs that's running at this particular point in time. We've got the artificial intelligence, healthcare, innovation and change, mega projects, smarter cities, smarter rural, smarter youth, energy, diversity, equity, inclusion, project management officers, environmental, social, and government. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Michael Guerin, and he will talk to us about Dublin's smart Docklands journey from a smarter city point of view. From a smarter cities SIG perspective, we believe that the focus should be on project program portfolio management, where your technology is the enabler to create smart cities towards a more livable, sustainable, and workable city into the future. Michael has great experience. He started his career initially as an accountant, and then soon realized that the world is much bigger and better. And he strived to work towards the smart city components. He became a project program manager and the lead for the startup island, and then he was the program manager for the Smart Docklands project. He played a leading role in the establishment of Smart Dublin Smart District program, which currently has 5 unique smart districts across Dublin region. The Dublin Smart Docklands is a unique smart city tested, where the municipality and academia have funded a project management office to play an honest broker role amongst other stakeholders in the smart city. Michael, great pleasure to meet you today, and we are looking all forward to the discussion and to learn from you. Welcome very much. You're welcome to share your presentation.
Thanks, Ben. Can you see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good stuff. Okay, I will kick off. I'm just going to move this away. Great. Okay, so nice to meet you all. As Ben said there, my name is Michael Guerin. I'm a project and program manager. For the last number of years, I have led the Smart Docklands program for Dublin City in Ireland. I'm going to talk to you today about the journey. It was a 4-year journey from the inception of the concept right the way through to, I suppose, what I'll show you at the end. I actually left my role in Smart Docklands last July to set up my own startup, which is an augmented reality platform. So I'll maybe touch a little bit on that today, but also I suppose the main bit for me today is to talk to you about the program and the projects within that, within the Smart Dublin program. And I think probably what the best thing to do, I'm going to give you a lot of different examples as we go through this. So probably the best thing is if you can ask as many questions as possible, because there'll be things you'll be wondering, how do we do something, or how do we get those people on board, or whatever it might be. So please feel free to ask as many questions as possible, and then we can get through them all at the end. So just so that we're all on the same page, what is a smart city then? So it's, for us, it's all about making data-driven decisions, and to do that you need real-time connected devices, and you need data to make those decisions. So that could be decisions around energy, smart buildings, connected health, smart energy. It could be air quality monitoring, flooding, e-mobility, bike sharing, any of these things. So these are all projects that we've been working on in Dublin over the last 5 or 6 years at this stage. I should highlight at this point, Smart Dublin is an initiative of the 4 Dublin local authorities. So we have Dublin City Council, which is the one for the city centre, and then there are 3 regional authorities. So that's South Dublin, Dunleer, down in Fingal. So all 4 of them are working together under the title and brand of Smart Dublin. I should also point out that there is and has been smart city technology in Dublin City for quite a long time. I often get asked, what is the, when will our city become a smart city? Most cities that you work in and live in at the minute will probably have some kind of bike sharing scheme or e-scooter scheme. They will probably have some kind of way of tapping on and off buses. There'll probably be signs to tell you when the next bus is. This is all a use of technology in cities, and a use of smarter technology in cities. And I suppose the success for us, and what we would consider success, is if you don't consider it a smart city project anymore, if it's just part of the daily lives of those citizens, it's probably become one of your more successful projects. So, acknowledging that we had some smart city technology in Dublin, what we wanted to do was create a test bed so that we could accelerate the amount of technology we could bring into the city. Obviously, to bring in new things into local authorities and into cities can be a difficult process, can be a very slow process, because typically cities are risk averse, so they don't tend to enjoy taking on new things, especially not a lot of new things at once. So what we decided to do is designate one area of the city where we could trial and test this new technology. And we decided to, so we had the Smart Dublin brand, which I showed you at the start, which looked like this. And what we decided to do was create a sub brand for our test bed. So it's aligned to Smart Dublin, but looked like this. So it's Smart Docklands. And it was actually a collaboration between Dublin City Council and Connect and Enable, which were 2 research centres in Trinity College in Dublin. So the area that we generally covered was just over 2.5 square kilometers in Dublin City. It happens to be home of most of the big tech companies in Dublin. So it's home to Google, who employ I think 8,000 or 9,000 people in the Docklands, Facebook, who employ 5,000. LinkedIn, Ancestry.com, Accenture have their global innovation hub there. So there's a lot going on in this area. There's also a lot of travel and tourism, and we have our concert venue there, our convention centre. So there's a lot happening in this area of Dublin, but it will be considered our central business district now. So for the Smart Docklands program, we decided to break it up into 3 separate work streams. The first one being connectivity as the underlying important element in a smart city. The second one being the projects and use cases on top of that, and the third one being engagement. So for all smart cities, connectivity is extremely important. And what I mean by connectivity, some of these you will recognize, some of them you may not. So 3G and 4G, Wi-Fi you probably recognize, fiber down the bottom right there, and 5G, as I mentioned. Some are maybe less familiar, so that's maybe LoRa, Sigfox, and narrowband IoT. So these are all different types of networks that either connect phones or devices or bikes or different things in a smart city. So for us to get all the projects that we wanted, and for us to make sure that we could deliver those data-driven decisions, we needed to make sure that we had all of these types of connectivity options available. So if somebody wanted to do something on environmental sensing or on bike sharing or whatever it might be, that the connectivity was there for them. I'll just highlight a couple of our major connectivity projects. This one was a first of its kind in the world. So I suppose to give a bit of context for this, for 5G in cities, we're going to need a lot of different radio equipment around the city. So the impact on the city is quite significant. So for 3G and for 4G, it didn't really matter because you had a mast, as you can see there, a macro site on the top of a building, maybe one every 5 kilometers, and that covered the 5-kilometer radius around it. So it didn't matter massively. But now and that's because the spectrum for 3G and 4G travel much further distances. For 5G, you could get some spectrum that travels maybe 500 meters. Some of it might only travel 100 to 200 meters, which means that you need to deploy a lot of different things on lampposts around cities. So what we engaged in and embarked on a project on how you could unlock the city's assets to deploy equipment. So this has actually become probably a globally significant project. You can see the small round grey object at the top of this lamppost. It seems quite simple to put something like this at the top of a pole, but there are all kinds of challenges here. If somebody crashes into that lamppost and the traffic lights go out and the pedestrian lights go out and the telecoms goes down, which is prioritized, who pays to fix it? If one falls off, who manages it? If somebody needs to maintain it, who manages it? So and then how do we understand what assets are suitable to deploy these types of technologies? So there was a whole stream of things that we had to overcome. The other reason this is quite important, this piece of technology in theory could propagate the signal of all our mobile network operators. So instead of having one for each of the operators in Ireland, we could actually just have one piece of technology that did it all in theory. So that's what we were exploring in this project. This project has scaled up quite significantly. I now chair a global telecoms body called the Telecom Infra Project, who have a solution group on connected city infrastructure. So this is where I met Rob initially. So we have a number of cities around the world that are trying to tackle these problems and then share their knowledge with other cities. Some of the indoor deployments then looked a bit like this. It's kind of like a large alarm clock, but this can bring 5G signal inside buildings. So that's just a little bit in connectivity. I'll not bore you with the details of connectivity, but the use cases and projects then that unlocks on top are probably the more interesting things. So smart bike lights, cyclist prioritization at junctions, flood monitors, flood prediction, air quality sensing. These are all different things that we deployed around Dublin City. So I'm going to go through some of these and give you some examples. I'll try to give you a bit of background on how the project came about and how it was managed. And then also if there's any information missing, or if you just want to know how something was achieved, please feel free to put a question in the Q&A box. So the first one I'll talk about is a flood prediction project that we had in Dublin for about 4 years. Essentially, what we wanted to do, so the current system for Dublin City Council, they had around 30 different sensors between rainfall and river level. Those sensors were very expensive. And the connectivity was very challenging to get it. And they also, because you had 3G connectivity on it, they needed to be plugged into mains power. So because you needed electricity plugged into it rather than a battery power, because the battery would drain within a day, it meant that you could only do it where you could put these things out in the open, but also plug them in, right? What changed in the technology space was you had these new networks, which I discussed earlier, LoRa, Sigfox, and NB-IoT, which meant that you could connect a sensor on a battery power for possibly up to 5 years without ever having changed the battery. So what that meant from Dublin City Council's perspective was, instead of having 30 sensors plugged in, they could, for the same price, possibly have 300 to 400 sensors all over the city, measuring rainfall and river levels and different weather conditions all around the city and giving that data back in real time. So the first thing was we could get a lot more data. We could also then get hyper-local rainfall notifications. And then in theory, could we get to a point where we use that data to predict flooding in Dublin? So it was a European project called Operandum. There's 6 other cities across Europe involved in it. And we also worked with a company called SoftBank, which some of you may be aware of. So SoftBank's IoT hub directly invested in the project in Dublin. The results were that we ended up getting we deployed a whole lot more sensors. 96 sensors in total. We got the data shared in an open data platform, which you can see called Dublinked. And that data was then used to start to predict flooding in Dublin. The project has progressed since this. We have now deployed, I think, an additional 50 weather stations. So what we're trying to do is understand, can we use this new type of technology to collect more data and then predict flood levels? So could we understand that if the rainfall is very heavy on the Dublin mountains and the soil is very wet in Dublin City and the ground is wet, in theory, it won't be absorbed as well. So is it more likely that the river levels will rise? And if it is, can we start to monitor if they are rising at the speed that they shouldn't be? And then if we are seeing that, can we notify residents and businesses that there will likely be a flood and they can do something about it rather than being retrospective action? So that's one of the flooding projects that we had. A second one, then, this is a common sight in a lot of cities. Drains get see on the right hand side there, drains get blocked because of leaves for the most part. So again, using the new type of technology that was available, this wouldn't have been possible years ago because you would have had to put a SIM card in the sensor. The sensor battery would have only lasted a short amount of time. You would have had to charge it or put a new battery in. These sensors can be deployed for up to 5 years, as you can see. You also, with one LoRaWAN gateway, so one piece of technology on a building, you can cover possibly up to 10 kilometers of a radius. So you can have one thing in a roof which covers 10 kilometers in a city, which can pick the data up from all of these sensors. So what we tried to do, and we worked with an Irish company called Denalto, was could we develop a sensor that is in all of these drains, or certainly the high risk drains in Dublin, so this being one of our high risk drains. Could we have sensors in all of these so that we can start to see which are filling up or more full than they should be? So if we know there's going to be a lot of rainfall tomorrow, then that means we can pass that data to the flood management team in Dublin City Council. So instead of them waiting to see where the floods are and trying to clean this up, they would be told that the drain is 90% full, more full than it should be. There's going to be a lot of rainfall tomorrow, so you need to clear it today so that it doesn't overflow when we get the large rainfall event the next day. So that's our two flooding projects that I'll talk about. Moving on to waste optimization and smart bins then. So some of you may have seen these types of bins before. This is a big belly bin. So essentially it's a solar powered bin which compresses the rubbish, which means you can fit up to 5 times as much rubbish in the bin. So that's the first benefit. The second benefit is that there's a sensor to tell you when the bin is full or nearly full. So instead of you having to go around every bin every day, you can just be told which bins actually need emptied. And then the other third benefit, certainly in a post-COVID world, is that there is a foot pedal, so you don't need to actually touch it with your hands. So this is the dashboard that comes out the other side. So we actually deployed 110 of these bins in Dublin Docklands. You can see at the time of this screenshot that only 12 of those bins needed emptied. So the previous process for Dublin City Council was, we don't know which bins need emptied, so we're going to have a team of people, they're going to walk around this route and they're going to empty each one of these bins 3 times per day. So instead of emptying all of these bins 3 times per day, just once per day, they go to the bins that actually need to be emptied. It takes a much shorter amount of time. They aren't throwing out all these plastic bags with almost no waste in it every day. So the efficiency was massively significant. I think we reduced waste collections in the Docklands by 87%. And that was just in one area of the city. So we're now rolling these out. I think there's now about 400 or 500 of these bins in the Dublin city area alone, and then another couple of hundred in the other local authority areas. So this was a massive success in Dublin. Another one then, if you look at the photos in the bottom right and bottom left, another very common complaint in cities by cyclists is where potholes are and cycling safety in cities. So we decided, again, using the types of networks that I mentioned earlier, smart low-powered networks, we connected 500 bike lights. So this is a company called C-Sense, who are an Irish company based just outside Belfast, and they developed a bike light that can detect potholes, it can detect near misses, it can detect accidents, it can detect what distance of travel you have. So you can see in the left hand side, the yellow is people traveling a certain distance, the green are a certain direction, the green is cyclists traveling a separate direction. Also, you can see all of the blue dots. That's all data points where a pothole was detected. This is actually just outside a building site in Dublin. So the road was really bad quality here. So you can see that's why it was picked up so badly. We also can map where cyclists are going. So you can see the most cycled routes there. So we can make sure that there is improved cycling infrastructure in the city. So this is one way of visualizing it. We then also tried to do a slightly different visualization where you could start to highlight certain aspects. So where are the popular routes? Also, how long are people waiting at lights? So could we extend lights, traffic lights, for 2 to 3 seconds to let more cyclists through? And also the roughness of road. So this is actually a cobbled street, which is why it came out so badly. So we start to use this data to inform decisions for cycling infrastructure in Dublin City. So I think in recent years, I think we've changed. So plans were made, cyclists were consulted, and the plans were refined, and then they were further changed or refined based on data that came out of this bike light program. So this actually, all of the cyclists, these bike lights are normally like 50 euros or 50 pounds. The city subsidized the lights down to, I think it was 10 euros for the participants, on the basis that they would get a very, very good light. Like this light, for context, also, whenever as a user you are whenever you're cycling and you brake, the light starts to shine brighter and flash quicker, so the person in front or the person behind you knows that you're braking. So there's a lot of benefits for the cyclist. But then what the city wanted to do was incentivize cyclists to opt into the trial, to share their data for a 3-month period, so that we could better understand cyclists in the city. Moving on then, this is a project with ARM and SoftBank again, and Dogpatch Labs. So this is what you're seeing is a floor plan of a co-working space in Dublin Docklands. So this is probably one of the most popular co-working spaces in Dublin. With a lot of very successful companies who have come through there. You can see what we were trying to do here was map where people were sitting at certain times, what seats were being used, what seats weren't being used, and try to measure and monitor the use of space over time. So we were able to do this with just 6 cameras, I think. All of these cameras were basically processing the images on the edge. So the file that was being sent back was a JSON file rather than images. So the cameras were technically there looking at the images, but no images were ever streamed or left the camera. So it was a very privacy focused project where we wanted to try and monitor space with cameras, but just use the camera as a sensor, not a camera as a way to take images or video. So this was the first deployment that we did, and we tried to understand how we could measure space in the location, but we then actually got it much more accurate. So we started to get to a point where we could detect which chairs are occupied and unoccupied. We could start to measure which chairs are always unoccupied, or which chairs are the last ones to be used. At times, we could see that there were some chairs that were always left empty, and that was because they just weren't very comfortable chairs. So the co-working space was able to change those chairs so more people wanted to do it. Also, some of the chairs weren't used in the morning, and that, as it turns out, is because most people are sitting on their laptops. There's sun coming in the windows at that point in the day, and they can't actually see the screen. So if you put up blinds, people are more likely to use that part of the co-working space. So it's all about trying to understand the use of space, and then how you could improve your offering for your members based on that. Moving on then, as I said, I'm going to run through quite a lot of different projects here, and then I'll conclude on our engagement piece. So this is another project that we launched initially as part of the Velo City, which is a large cycling conference which moves around the world. It happened to be in Dublin. We had what was called a smart pedal pitch. I didn't come up with the name, so forgive me on that. So we had the smart pedal pitch. There was 12 companies from 9 different countries competed for it, and the winner was the Dublin Cycling Buddy. So this is basically an app which can be used by cyclists to not only give them the most direct route, but they also have the most bike-friendly route, and then they also have the cleanest or greenest route. So that's taking into account air quality, and then also taking into account in the bike-friendly route where the cycling infrastructure is. So Google will always give you the most direct route. This you can choose. Certainly if you're a more nervous cycler, you can, or cyclist, I should say, you can say that I want to get from A to B, but take the most bike-friendly route, and it will take you along the existing cycling infrastructure. So we launched that just last year, and we've had reasonable uptake in Dublin on that. Another cycling focused project then, you can see at the top of this pole, and at the top of the pole just here, if you can see my cursor, a little black panel which looks a lot like an iPhone size device. This is a radar panel. It's called a Smart Micro. So this essentially this project was to try and understand and measure how many cyclists there are in the city, but then also make things cycling safer in the city. So what we've actually done at this junction is these things can detect up to 300 meters away from where they are. They can detect whether it's a pedestrian, a cyclist, a car, a bus, a truck, whatever it might be. Because it can detect, and it's a radar sensor, so it can do everything in real time. It can detect where something is 300 meters away. It can also detect the speed at which things are moving towards that set of traffic lights. So what we actually have deployed, I think there's over 100 of these now in Dublin City at different junctions around the city to prioritize cyclists. So this can detect if a cyclist is approaching. It then measures in real time, the traffic light is going to go red and this cyclist is going to just miss the traffic lights. So to try and improve cycling safety and for that person to not run that red light, what we do is extend the green light for another 2 to 3 seconds if they're going to make it based on their speed, let the cyclist through and then change the light. So it's kind of like dynamic use of traffic lights in the city to try and prioritize cyclists. This project then, this was one of my major projects during my time. This is a very common sight in Dublin City. About 20 to 30 of these ring buoys are stolen every day in Dublin. So about 400 a year are stolen in Dublin. That's a significant cost for the city, but also a significant cost in life. So unfortunately, actually just along the stretch that is photographed here, after these photos were taken, a gentleman died in Dublin City falling in because he died late at night, but there was no ring buoys in place because they often get stolen and then they don't get replaced in time. So the current process for checking whether they were missing was once or twice a week. There was a group of people that walked around the city on behalf of Dublin City Council, checked which are missing. They wrote it down on a bit of paper, reported it back, and then that person would order new ones in, or whenever they get around to it, deploy new ones. So that at times they were missing for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. So coming from a smart city perspective, we felt that we could do a whole lot better. So how could we improve the safety of water safety in the city, and how could we reduce the time that these things are missing if they're stolen, and then how could we actually reduce the number that are stolen? So what we decided to do initially, we were going to just work with one company and let them put a solution on there. And what we decided to do was have a procurement competition. So it was the first of its kind in Ireland, where we got €40,000 in funding. We put out a call to the market and said the value, and what we also did, there's 31 local authorities in Ireland. We got 22 of them, I think, to sign up to a procurement contract with us. And they basically said, you guys can do the trialing, you can deal with the hassle for 12 to 18 months, and then let us know the outcome. And then if there's anything suitable, because we've been listed on the original tender documentation, we'll be able to buy rather than having to go through our own tender process. The other reason we did that, what we wanted to do was have new and innovative companies coming in and pitching their solutions and possibly coming up with new solutions to this problem. If this problem was just Dublin City Council's problem, it was a small problem. If this is an Irish national problem and the potential contract is much, much bigger, then we're likely to get more interest in it. So what we decided to do was we managed to get 22 local authorities, I think, on board at the end. We got them on board, got them signed up, and then we as Dublin City Council, over a period of 12 months, put out a call for pilots. I think we got about 20 applications. We chose 4 companies. They were each given €10,000 and 9 months to develop and trial their solution. We rolled those solutions out then across the city. So in the 4 different local authority areas, we had between 10 and 20 sensors deployed for 6 months. And then at the end of that, there was an evaluation process, and 3 of the 4 companies were deemed successful and brought to phase 2 of the tender process. And at that point, anybody could buy the solutions from there on. It's been massively successful. Some of the local authorities have already placed orders for the sensors that we developed and trialed as part of this process. And Dublin City Council have just placed a significant order to put these sensors on I think 150 of their ring buoys around the city. So massively successful project, a very challenging one. The procurement was a massive thing to overcome. What we wanted to do was give seed fund companies to get them on board, forward, give them a bit of financial support, but also make the prize at the end big enough for them. So a successful one in the long run, but a hard one to get across the line. I think this is the last project that I'll talk about before I move on to engagement. Quite a few slides on it. So essentially this is an aerial image of Dublin Docklands. What you probably don't notice if you don't know the city is some of these buildings are actually not, they didn't exist at the time of this photograph. They're actually 3D models. So all of these buildings are 3D models. So the reason this is significant, whenever these buildings are being designed and modeled, what they tend to do is work with a 3D modeling agency. That modeling agency creates very accurate and detailed models, which can be used for mock-ups and images. And then after that, after it's used for marketing purposes, it tends to just sit on a hard drive and not be used after. So what we wanted to understand was, could we take that data and could we then build out the other existing buildings in Dublin Docklands and create a digital twin for this district? So this is a drone video of Dublin Docklands, one which I showed you earlier. And what you'll see now is the 3D model and digital twin that we created for the whole district. I think it switches just now. There we go. So you can see the accuracy. One of our biggest challenges here was the models themselves were actually extremely accurate. So we needed to understand what level of accuracy we needed depending on the use case. So if the use case was just to look at building heights, it wasn't massively important, but if it was to look inside a building, it was very important. So this is the CHQ building in Dublin Docklands. It's a 200-year-old cast iron building. This is what the data looks like originally. So it's using LiDAR, we do a full point cloud scan of the area, and then we're able to translate that into a digital twin model. And then this is inside actually the co-working space that I mentioned to you earlier. This is a scan of inside that environment. So we're able to do and you can see the cast iron ceiling here. You can see how much detail comes out by doing these scans. So you can start to really apply a lot of different use cases. This is the convention center in Dublin. This is what it looks like in drone footage, and then in the digital twin. And I think there is one last video. So this again is the convention center. So you can see how much detail is in the model. So we can use this for traffic planning, for telecoms planning. This is a new bridge that we actually, before this bridge was rolled out or built, what we did with Dublin Docklands residents was brought them all into a room, put a VR headset on them, and let them walk around these new bridges. So this bridge that you can see ahead of you still doesn't exist, but as part of the planning process, Dublin City Council wanted to use augmented and virtual reality to understand what people think of the new bridge plans and to get their feedback to see if it's suitable for cyclists and pedestrians. So you can see the plans there. Probably one of the most interesting things was the planners themselves, when they put the headset on, they realized that the models for this area and this particular junction, some of the areas were too tight for pedestrians and some were too tight for cyclists. So using VR, they were able to see what it would feel like as a pedestrian and as a cyclist, and then they changed their plans based on this. So it's a way for us, a couple of things. One is a way for us to get feedback from citizens, and one is a better way for us to plan within the city as well. And so we used this data. We actually released all of this data as part of a 3D data hack, which had all of these partners on board. We got loads of really interesting solutions back. One was Dublin Fire Brigade using it to create an augmented reality app so that whenever they arrive at an emergency, they can see exactly where the alarm panels are, the risers, the hydrants, that type of thing. And the one on the left is a company that tried to create what new buildings would look like, so you could get feedback from citizens. And staying on the augmented reality theme then, so Dublin Docklands is about to launch an augmented reality tour for heritage, history and culture. So it'll be a 15-stop AR tour all around the district using the 5G connectivity that we have there, but as a way of people visualizing what the area used to look like. And I'm just going to conclude then on the engagement piece. So two sides of the engagement. One is with communities and the other is with the market. So with communities, like it's really important when we're doing any of this in a city that we get all of these, basically get everyone on board or make them aware of what we're doing. So we identified at the start that there's 4 main stakeholder groups in the Docklands. One is those who look after physical infrastructure, so Dublin City Council, Waterways Ireland, the building owners, etc. The other is hospitality and tourism. So we have our 3 arena there, our National Convention Centre, a lot of hotels, museums, that type of thing. Residents are obviously extremely important. We have 2 different communities within the Docklands, I would say. So one is the old community. Their families typically worked within the docks, and the other is the new community, which typically work in the Googles and Accentures and that type of thing. And then the last very important one is developers and property. So it's actually a strategic development zone for Dublin City Council. There's been a huge amount of development there over the last 10 years. And because there's so many new buildings, it was very important to get them in the room. So what we decided to do was run a number of workshops. We ran 25 workshops, so actually I think over 30 in the end, but 400 attendees, and we were supported by Deloitte, Accenture, and the Fjord team within Accenture. And from that, we got over 450 challenges. Basically, the crux of the workshop was, tell us all the problems you face in Dublin City, so we know if we get an opportunity to trial new technology that is actually addressing a problem. There's no point in us deploying technology that isn't actually addressing a real problem for citizens. So these were the main themes, and then the subcategories that came out of that. This would form the basis of our full program within Dublin Docklands. So if somebody approached us with something that wasn't relevant to the problems that existed there, we didn't engage in it. So I think it's really important that anything you do in a city, you really understand the stakeholders and what problems they face before you deploy anything. We also then ran a number of workshops with, this was actually during COVID, at the very first lockdown, I think, a number of workshops online with different students to teach them, I suppose, how to use a design thinking approach to identifying problems and solving problems. And this is some of the solutions that they come up with for the Ring Boy challenge that I mentioned earlier. And then this transitioned into what we now call Academy of the Near Future. So we've actually developed an education program for upskillers and students. It's a smart city and urban connectivity or urban innovation education program. It teaches people about sensors, about connectivity, and then about how to engage. And there's an ethics module. So there's a number of different modules within that. And you can see some of the workshops that we have run here. So these are now being run all across Dublin and actually all across Ireland. I think they have now engaged with over 1,000 students in Ireland. And the hope is to package this up so that other cities could use this around the world. So I'm just going to conclude. If you want to find out more about Smart Dublin and any of the projects that are ongoing, there's a public Trello board. So if you Google Smart Dublin Trello, you'll get to see all of the projects there. There's, I think, over 200 projects now. Whenever I joined the team, there was just 3 people, and I was the 4th, so and 2 people were part-time. So there was a very small team at the start. There's now about 27 people across the 4 local authorities all working on smart cities. The whole thing is scaled massively in the last 4 to 5 years. I think there's over 200 projects that we engage in under a number of different themes. Smart environment, you can see along the top there, smart people, mobility, economy, government, and living. So if you want to find out more about any of these projects, Google Smart Dublin Trello, and you'll be able to read about them there. And I'll just conclude maybe on some of the impact pieces. So we hosted the Harvard 5G Accelerator in Dublin City, and then also hosted the Dutch Royals a couple of years ago as well. And for our troubles, won some awards around the world. So we were finalists in the World Smart City Awards in 2019, listed as Smart Location of the Future for Strategy in 2019-2020, and then winner at the World Small Cell Awards, and we were included in the Reuters Global Thought Leaders series. And I'll just very much conclude on this bit. So I mentioned Smart Docklands, which was the first test bed that I established. I then helped the team set up a smart district and smart test bed framework. So we have 5 official smart districts around Dublin now. So Smart Docklands is focused on telecoms and environmental sensing. Sandyford is focused on mobility. Dublin 8 is focused on healthcare and well-being. DCU is focused on mobility, and Smart Balbriggan is very community engagement focused, because there's a lot of things to address, I suppose, in Balbriggan. So this model is now used, I think, in different districts in London, in Portugal, and in Arizona. So I'm going to stop talking now, because that's a lot of talking, but I'm sure you have some questions. So thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for taking us through the projects and the initiatives that Dublin has taken. I'm sure, I know because you and I have spoken quite a lot recently, and I know there's quite a lot to everything you've just discussed. So I would encourage questions from the audience today. If you want to delve into a little bit deeper into any of the aspects mentioned, I've certainly got a few questions. But before I ask mine, I'm going to go to the Q&A. Mark, you've got a couple of questions. The first one is, did you complete a cost-benefit analysis for these projects, Michael?
We did for all of them. I suppose what we found, Mark, cost benefit is an important aspect, but it's not the only aspect. And probably feeding into your third question there, the cost is relatively important, but there are other aspects that we need to bring into the analysis. So feedback from stakeholders and citizens after is very important. Maybe to touch on both of these questions, they essentially, you know, I'm showing you all the good bits here and all the projects that, you know, I suppose turned out well and all the successful ones. There's also a graveyard, I think at times it was called the innovation graveyard, of projects that just didn't work out, and didn't work out for a number of reasons. At times it was cost, at times it was not getting the right stakeholders involved. At times, I suppose acknowledging your last question there, that it wasn't established maybe for the right reasons. So it might have been a good opportunity for the city, but it wasn't really something that was required as the citizens. So that's why we started to focus a lot more on the engagement, to understand what people really wanted and needed, and then any project was deployed based on that. So we did do a cost benefit analysis. It was an important piece of it, but it was just one piece, I suppose, of the analysis and the impact that we measured at the end. The second question you have there, use program
so I'll read it out for you, Michael. Did you use program management, a program management approach to manage these projects, or were they managed as independent projects? And then on top of that, what aspects influence the choice of program or project management approach? What lessons were learned in terms of program and or project management approach? That's a value pack question there.
Yeah, definitely. So a couple of things, Mark. We at times it was muddy or grey waters between program and project management. So and there's also multiple layers within this. So Smart Dublin has its program of projects. Smart, and that includes Smart Docklands and all the other districts. And then Smart Docklands has it as a program, and then all of the projects within it. Each of the local authorities have their programs with projects within them. So there was multiple programs happening at one time that there was a lot of overlap in, and I think I have a visualization of that somewhere, which you could probably share with you. So there was a lot of programs that worked together essentially, but then each project was managed individually. And based on its own merits. Some of these were like 3-month projects, some of these were 3-year projects. So so it was very much, and I suppose what we learned at the start, and maybe a mistake in a lot of this, like I feel like program and project management was massively important throughout the process. For and still is massively for Smart Dublin. So what they didn't you know, essentially what we got wrong, what a lot of cities get wrong, is they hire engineers or data analysts or whatever it might be to manage the projects that are involved, because they will know. So they might hire somebody who really knows about environmental sensing, but that person tends to have a speciality or an expertise in that rather than the project or program management skills. So what we realize, it's difficult in Dublin City. I'm not sure what it's like in your cities, but very difficult to hire project managers. It tends to be somebody that needs to do a job. So it needs to be an analyst or an engineer, because you know, managing a project isn't isn't doing a job. So you know, it's very difficult to hire them. What we ended up doing, so my role, I was actually hired as a researcher technically, but I was there to manage a Smart Docklands program. So we needed to find ways around it, because it's difficult to hire project managers essentially. But what we realized was it was vitally important for us going forward for somebody to be able to establish and set up a project correctly at the start, have the correct KPIs at the start to manage the process the whole way through, and then also have a conclusion to projects. So in the first couple of years, we got, took a lot of projects on, we're quite excited about it, and we were taking quite a lot on. But what we realized, some of them were kind of drifting, some of them we hadn't really dealt with in 2 months. And what we needed to do was have a start and an end date for all projects. And at the end date, we have a gate process essentially. So it's a go or no go. Is the project, and there's a number of KPIs, so, but has it been overall successful? Has it matched the KPIs? And is it something we want to extend? And if it is, who's going to manage it, and is there the funds there to do that? So we basically learned that an end date was as important as a start date, essentially, from the project perspective. And then the other thing, lessons learned. I mean, for us, like within the smart, I mean, there's loads of lessons learned. I could you sit here all day, I suppose, talking about all the lessons learned, but like a couple of things from different perspectives. One, a lot of smart cities, I think, as Ben touched on at the start, smart cities often talk about technology and whatever else. The technology is not the basis to this whatsoever. The technology is the easy bit, really. The people is the challenging bit, and it's challenging because you've got to get it right. So there are a lot of stakeholders involved in smart cities. You can see that this cuts across like engineering, telecoms, sustainability, environment, transport. There's so many different expertise involved in the smart city world. So it's really important to get all those stakeholders on board, and to listen to a lot of opinions. And it's also then, as a project or program manager, it's very challenging to take on so many opinions and still move forward. So the easier thing to do, and what some cities do, is they take on some opinions and then they just keep going with the direction that they have. But what you really need to do is take on a whole lot more opinions and then still be able to move forward. And I think the best way we found to do that was to have as transparent a process as possible. So in the engagement sessions that I think I mentioned the 30 odd workshops that we ran with the stakeholders in the Docklands, what was really important for us was to run sessions once every 6 months. And after, in the 6 month or the 12-month session, we needed to talk about all the challenges they had given us, what ones we've worked on and what ones we hadn't worked on. And the ones we hadn't worked on was just as important to explain our process and why we hadn't selected it. At times we didn't have the funds to support it. At times it didn't fit into what we were working on. At times it fitted in with a different department. But I think it was really important for us to be transparent with stakeholders as much as possible. So a big thing there, it's really not about the technology, it's about the people. And the best way to work with people, I think, we found, was transparency. And then the other thing, which is largely linked, is you've probably saw, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 different logos in my presentation there. They're of all the different companies that we collaborated with throughout the process. You will never, ever be able to do all of this or do any of this trying to do it yourself. So especially, as I mentioned, in a smart city space, but almost any space, there are so many different opinions to take on board, but there's so many people this impacts. So it has to be collaborative. And we use this term in Smart Dublin, true collaboration. And what we mean by true collaboration is, it's not collaboration where everybody sits in a room because they were told to by their boss. They kind of nod at each other and, say that they're all there to collaborate, but they don't really like what the person's saying across the room because they think they know it better and whatever else. The way to get to true collaboration is people need to enter a room, and the baseline has to be, we don't know how to do this because it's the first time it's been done. So none of us are an expert, but we all have our level of expertise. But let's kind of drop the barriers. We're not, we don't know how to do this, but let's work it out together. And if we get it wrong, that's okay. So mitigating the risk for people is quite important, especially for companies, Google, Facebook and others. We've got to manage the risk for them, but we have to put our hands up and acknowledge that we don't know how to do this. We really have no idea how to do some of the projects, but if we work together in an agile approach, and we are happy to be 6 months in and realize we've gone a different direction, we needed to go back to where we were 3 months ago and go a slightly different direction. If we take that type of approach on board, we're much more likely to get there. But that comes from, that collaboration comes from building the trust and building the honesty. And we're very, I think we're very lucky in Dublin. We have a lot of these big tech companies here, and in Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook and Microsoft do not sit in the same room. That just doesn't happen to collaborate on projects. In Ireland, there's a lot of senior people in those companies that all kind of went to college and school together, so they kind of know each other. So there was a level of trust there already. So we were able to get to a level of trust, a level of transparency, and then the collaboration was able to go from there. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, Mark.
Thanks, Michael. I think I see Mark says there, thank you very much for the responses. So I think he's happy with the answer. From my side, what would you say was the most important aspect? And I do understand that in Dublin City Council and the other local councils involved in these test beds, there are many challenges in terms of organizational challenges and procurement challenges, etc. What would you say was the single most, the factor that supported it the most? What was the driver to success in establishing this from zero effectively?
I'm not sure I could put it down to a single most, Rob, to be honest with you. I think, as I just discussed, collaboration was vitally important, but there were other influences at play. So one of them, like a big portion of this, to be honest, I've seen it. I work with the Harvard City Innovators Forum, so I work in a lot of different cities around the world, and I've seen success and cities who have been challenged. A big part of this is getting senior management buy-in, whether that's a chief executive or others. So you can, at times there are very enthusiastic people in a city, but the people above them don't care what they're doing. So it's very difficult to make progress. So getting that senior buy-in is really important, and that kind of support. The collaboration is really important, and then funding. So like there's two different parts of this. Like one was the research bit, and then so that's whenever we're able to test things, and then the next bit is transitioning that then to reality, I suppose. So there's funding at the start and getting the research bit right, and then there's working out how to do the procurement piece. And I think, as cities, we need, certainly in a European context, we really needed to look at how we purchase things is not very innovative at all, and it doesn't leave, there's zero scope for innovation. So unless it has a track record for years and has generated loads of revenue for this big company, then we're not interested in buying it. But that's largely anti-innovation. What we need is new and exciting companies doing new things. But obviously from a city's perspective, you need to manage that risk as well. So that's why we set up that procurement structure for the Ringboy project, which I mentioned, which is now being used across a number of different projects. It gives us an opportunity to work with startups and small companies, give them some funding, and then let them trial things. So I think, that's probably 3 or 4 things, Rob, but collaboration, the funding, procurement, I can't remember what the 4th thing was, but that's, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, thanks. I think it does, Let me just see if we've got any other questions here. We've got Mark's questions. Thank you from Mohammed. That appears to be the questions for today. Ben, I'm going to hand over back to you.
Thank you very much. And let me just share my screen quickly just to conclude. Michael, thank you very much. And Rob, thanks for facilitating the discussion. It's much appreciated. Just for our participants, a couple of just notes. We will issue badges to everybody that attended. Please, will you, once you receive your badge, share that on all our media, LinkedIn as well, and the like. We are trying to for you as members to also benefit, and there will also be 1.5 CPD points for attending for our participants for IPMA. So from IPMA. So thank you very much. If you don't mind, we would also like to hear back from you. We've got a satisfaction survey running that will be shared with you after this particular call. If you can please provide us feedback, it will really be appreciated. Please visit our website, sig.ipma.world, and in there we will be able to share with you anything that you would like to know about the SIGs, what we're doing, what is our next events, and then you can also there apply if you would like to be interested in specifically joining a particular SIG. You are welcome also to reach out to me on ben.peters@ipma.world. should you be interested in joining the Smarter City SIG, we are doing fascinating work in the SIGs. We've got webinars. We are busy developing a guideline how to utilize project program portfolio management towards smarter cities. We've got various ideas with regards to podcast and where people can listen and be interviewed. We would also like to reach out to you should you have any particular idea in becoming smarter with a smarter cities lens. Please reach out to me. We would like to engage with you. We would like to work with you. And we've got monthly meetings on our IPMA Smarter City SIG, where we just collaborate, we network, and we try to benefit as we continue. Thank you very much for joining. It is 5 minutes to, and we finished on time. Have a great day further. Goodbye.